Can I go on a little bit to after you won the title, the championship? So the season after that was a bit of a dire struggle. So there was a lot of hopes you'd kick on, but I just wondered what happened there. So some talk about Cantona, some talk about the introduction of the back pass rule or players getting older. What do you think happened to make it such a difficult following season?
A combination of all that. A combination of all that. Gordon, right from the very off, had said, look, you know, I mean, when I signed Gordon, he was going to go to Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah.
He didn't believe me when I said, you know, I can get you fitter than you are now. You think you're not going to be good and fit enough. I said, get you beyond where you are now. And at that time, we got one or two players who, you know, there were other clubs. It was a time of change, and there were other clubs paying more money than us, paying vast amounts, talking to players and talking to agents and so on. And then there was Eric. We got one or two injuries as well. I remember Leslie coming into the office one afternoon, and he said, because I'd spoken to him during the previous season, quite early on when we were going well. And I said, you know, I'm not saying that you can turn it down, Leslie, but you can get where you want to be too soon. And at the moment, we are very much thin on the ground in terms of, we've got a good group in and around the first team, but beneath that, the structure that we wanted, that I had set out in our many meetings, the structure that I wanted to create, we're nowhere near that yet.
The strength of squad, you mean?
Strength of squad, developing our own. I mean, we'd already started with what was the birth of academies, in the sense that I persuaded Leslie when we moved to the new training ground, even before we moved, him and I had discussed this, that I believed the best way to bring up the youngsters. I mean, when I got there, I think there were 31, I can't remember, they'd signed a heck of a lot of apprentices. And I think we signed one. And that might have been Gary Speed. I could be wrong. But
it was that there weren't many that got through, was there? And that it was, I know I've read somewhere that you wanted to try and improve that ratio, do more with them and make them more likely to go on, because it was just damaging to them, obviously.
Yeah, and hence when I became technical director, we changed the name as a symbolic from apprentice to scholar. And in the new training ground, that set the model for academies, because I built an accommodation block, and we had a partnership with the local school, and the lads joined us, lived in the accommodation block. Partnership with the local school meant that we spent more time with them whilst they were schoolboys, and they weren't travelling. You know, it was just up the road to school, and the training ground was just outside when they opened the door. And we got a housemaster in, and unfortunately he's just died, a great bloke, Peter Gumby, and his wife, two really decent, good people, family people, who gave those lads that sense of being part of a family, but a family with discipline. So Peter took upon himself to inspect their bedroom every morning.
All right.
Go to a bedroom and he'd tell them, that bed's not not good enough. But they weren't washing cars or painting white lines or helping cut the grass or sweeping the stands.
Right.
They were learning to be footballers, and if they failed at football, they were learning that it wasn't the end of the world.
Yeah, and you built a really good academy and a really good conveyor belt in terms of players coming through in that Youth Cup '93. I remember that. But I just want to go, and you talked a little bit there about others spending money. And in that next season, there is a story that you weren't allowed or didn't have access to the money that was needed to keep things going that season. You've told me before about the players you signed, Scott Sellers and David Rocastle, and that you talked about squad strength. But did the board ever deny you the money to do the development? So you talked there about you didn't have the strength in squad. Were the people that you wanted to buy, but you weren't able to or weren't allowed to?
No, we weren't made of money. We had a debt that was far greater than it should be. Leslie was, there was Leslie, Bill Follett and Peter. And there were clubs, there were boys, players at Leeds who were being talked to by other clubs and told what they could get. So it was difficult, but it was difficult, but I always knew that we'd come through it and finish up with the finished product that we required. And I think I mentioned it. I think the semi-final in the Champions League, you look at the team sheet, proved it.
Tony Yeboah came in and he was a fantastic, world-class at his peak.
Yeah.
I think I know what happened, but can you tell me what went wrong with it? Because it was went into the next season and he was, world-class, bagging them in from everywhere. And there's the bit about the Africans Cup, but what went wrong with Tony Yeboah?
Nothing went wrong with him in the sense of who he was. He was well liked by the players. As a person, he was a good family man. I'll tell you how well liked by the players he was. After he'd arrived, one morning I got a delegation which was Gordon Strachan, Gary McAllister and Gary Speed. Said, "Can we see you, Gaffer?" Yeah. Listen, we think you're being a bit hard on Tony in terms of when we lose the ball. And basically he said, we know if he gets a chance, he scores. So we just wanted to basically tell you, we don't, it's not a problem when we lose the ball that he's maybe not as committed as you might like, because we know when he gets a chance, he'll score it. Then that's good enough for us. And for me, that was some of my beliefs being repaid, because I always said to them that, being in this environment is a two-way thing. You are out there, you are doing it, you're feeling it, you're in the trenches. So your views are as valid as mine. So if you feel strongly about something, for God's sake, come up and say it. And so they did now and again.